Okay, the Sentinel program, part 2. Well, let's learn about a while loop and how it uses a Sentinel value to run. So if you look at line 36, you'll see you have the while with parentheses, and inside the parentheses, you're going to put some sort of Boolean expression that is if this Boolean expression is true, the coding will enter the while loop and it'll do all the lines of executable code that you have in the while loop. And then when it's done at the end, it will go back up to the while loop and check to see if he's still true. If the while loop is still true, it'll do it all over again. And it'll just keep doing it over and over and over until the while line, the header of the while loop, becomes false. As soon as line 36 becomes false, it skips this whole section and it will start whatever code is right after the closing squiggle bracket. And whatever you have code there, that's what it'll do. Doesn't matter what the code is, it'll start doing top down from there. Okay, for all of you who are going to have syntax errors with semicolons, the while loop header does not get a semicolon. Just like the class header, just like a method header, just like an if header, a while loop does not get a semicolon. All right, so let's read this real quick. Oop, I'm going the wrong way. All right, the while loop to repeat until it will repeat. The while loop will repeat. Let me fix this. Will, yes, I have such good English. Will repeat until the Boolean expression becomes false. Then it exits the loop. Then it will exit the loop and continue with the code just below the loop. While loops often use a Sentinel value. If you spell Sentinel right, values chosen by the user or programmer. So look at line 46. While some entry that's coming into the while loop that is either pre-programmed or is being passed in by another program, or it's being passed in by the scanner, which is our case today. We're going to pass in some sort of value to the scanner. As long as it is not equal to the Sentinel value. Now remember, this Sentinel value could be a number. It could be, when you pick this number, you want to make sure that number that's chosen as a Sentinel number is not a typical number that the user would be entering. I mean, it could be a very large number, like, I don't know, really big number, or it could be a negative number, some number that you know that would not be in the input data set. Otherwise, you get an accidental termination of the while loop. All right. Now, okay, so the while loop remains true as long as this doesn't equal the Sentinel. As soon as it equals the Sentinel, it becomes false and it'll kick out. All right, so those are all the concepts we learned today. Now we're going to write a program. We have a couple input statements because we're going to use both the scanner and decimal format. Import java.util.scanner. As usual, I will be uploading this this time. If you have gone to Schoology and you downloaded this, I'm just going to replace it. Okay, I'm not going to put final on it because I also have a tester. The tester will remain the same. So I'm just going to replace the old Sentinel program. So type along with me, but when I'm done, after I'm done today, the one on Schoology will be complete. and I'm not going to add the word complete to it. It has all these notes that are important and the program as an example. All right, so we need some object for the class. You know, we need a scanner object, right? So we need an object from the scanner. Scan. All right. We also need a decimal object. All right, so I'm going to do 2 decimals, okay? So I'm going to call it dec 2. All right, so I don't know how big my numbers are, so I'm going to use a format that will get me big numbers too with decimals. And I like to force a 0 in front of my decimal in case it's like 0.25. It'll be 0.25. And then we got 2 decimals. All right. All right, so this is going to give us 2 decimals. If two decimals don't exist, there won't be a number there. It will not force any zeros. All right. So let's do some instant variables. So we got private int. So we got sum, which is the sum, the value, which is going to be input value. We got count, which we're going to keep track of how many times our loop happens. And then we got num. All right. We also have our answer, which is a double, which is average. So we're going to average a bunch of numbers. All right. Now we have to set everything equal to 0. So we got sum, which equals value, which equals count, which equals num, equals 0. Now the reason why we're not assigning average to 0 is we're going to be assigning a mathematical expression to average, so it will be instantiated. We don't have to worry about it not being instantiated before we print it. So this is, we're instantiating 0 to num, count, value, and sum. Now we have our program. If I can ever scroll up. All right. Now, let's talk about the initial, if I can spell it correctly, the initial input. Because the initial input, boy, I can't spell today, could match the Sentinel, the while loop could immediately become false. So the first attempt to use the while loop could fail. And that means none of the executable code in the while loop will be reached. So a while loop does not guarantee that the code will ever be reached. Boy, that sure sounds like a test question. All right, so keep that in mind. A while loop does not guarantee that it'll ever be executed because it could be false the very first time. All right, so let's set up a way we get an initial input, all right? So this is kind of long, so just kind of type along and stop the video, catch up if I'm typing too fast. So I'm typing a little kind of like an intro. I'm going to use -1 as my Sentinel. You'll notice I'm doing \n. So this is going to look like a little paragraph when we print it. All right. Okay, this program will sum and average the integers you enter. Enter -1 to end the program and show the average. Enter an integer. Okay, so the problem here is if the very first number I enter is -1, this while loop will never be executed. It'll immediately dump out and start doing the code below the while loop. So it does not guarantee. So I would not pick a Sentinel that is in the data set that could be entered. So if negative numbers are a possibility, then don't use a negative number. Use some ginormous number. All right? Now let's do a while loop. All right. So while, and what we have, oh, I forgot a couple things. Sorry, let's go back up here. All right, so he enters. We gotta take their input and we gotta put it in something. So value is what we're putting it into. We're gonna assign it to scan.nextInt, right? And then we gotta clear our keyboard. Oops. All right, forgot to do that. All right, so end of part 2, on to part 3.